A woman stands on a shell, arriving at the shore from the open sea. Her hair moves in the wind. Two figures blow her toward land from the left, their breath scattering roses across the surface of the water. On the right, a woman rushes forward with a cloak to cover her. The scene is calm, almost dreamlike. The colors are pale and luminous. Everything about it suggests arrival, beginning, the first moment of something new and beautiful entering the world. But the woman at the center of this painting was already dead when it was made. Her name was Simonetta Vespucci. She died in April 1476 at the age of 22 from tuberculosis. She had been the most celebrated beauty in Florence, the beloved of Giuliano de' Medici, the younger brother of Lorenzo the Magnificent, and the object of an adoration so intense and so widespread that when she died, the entire city mourned her publicly. Poets wrote about her. Crowds lined the streets for her funeral procession, and a painter named Sandro Botticelli, who had known her, who had painted her face repeatedly during her lifetime, and who may have loved her in a way he never once put into words, spent the next decade making her immortal. The Birth of Venus was painted approximately 8 years after Simonetta died. Botticelli was working from memory. Florence and the Medici. To understand this painting fully, you need to understand the world it came from. Florence in the 1470s and 1480s was one of the most extraordinary places in the history of Western civilization. Under the patronage of the Medici family, bankers, power brokers, and cultural visionaries, the city had become the center of a philosophical and artistic revival that would shape European thought for the next 2 centuries. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as the Magnificent, surrounded himself with poets, philosophers, and painters. He sponsored a circle of humanist thinkers, most notably Marsilio Ficino, who were attempting to reconcile the philosophy of Plato with Christian theology. At the center of their thinking was the idea that beauty, genuine ideal beauty, was not a distraction from the divine but a path toward it. To encounter perfect beauty was to encounter something of God. In this context, a painting of Venus was not a frivolous or pagan commission. It was a philosophical statement. Venus, in the Neoplatonist thinking that dominated Medici Florence, was not simply the goddess of desire. She was a symbol of humanatus, the ideal of civilized, educated, spiritually elevated humanity. The Birth of Venus was a meditation on how beauty enters the world and what it means when it does. Botticelli had been working within this intellectual world for years. He was a close associate of Lorenzo de' Medici and moved freely within the circle of scholars and artists that the Medici patronized. He was, by the time he received the commission for the Birth of Venus, already one of the most respected painters in Florence. The commission most likely came from a member of the extended Medici family, and the painting was intended for a private villa rather than a church, which is itself significant. This was art made for contemplation in a domestic space, for an educated viewer who would understand its references and feel their weight. Sandro Botticelli was born Alessandro di Mariano di Vanni Filippetti in 1445 in Florence. He trained under the painter Filippo Lippi, and the influence of that training is visible throughout his work in the delicacy of his line and the softness of his figures. But Botticelli developed something that went beyond technique, an ability to render a face with a quality that is difficult to name precisely, a kind of interior distance, a gaze that looks at you and past you simultaneously. His Venuses, his Madonnas, his allegorical figures all share it. They are present and unreachable at the same time. If you have ever wondered where that quality came from, one answer is Simonetta Vespucci, the woman behind the goddess. Simonetta Cataneo was born in Genoa around 1453 and married Marco Vespucci, a relative of the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, when she was approximately 15 years old. The marriage brought her to Florence, and Florence, within a very short time, recognized her as something exceptional. She moved in the highest circles of Florentine society, with a naturalness that impressed people who were difficult to impress. Lorenzo de' Medici admired her. His brother Giuliano was openly, publicly devoted to her. At the famous joust of 1475, Giuliano rode under a banner bearing her image and the inscription, La Sans Pareille, the without equal. She was 21. She was dead within a year. The tuberculosis that killed her had been progressing for some time, and her death in April 1476 struck Florence with the force of genuine grief. Lorenzo himself wrote sonnets mourning her. Giuliano, who would be assassinated in the Pazzi conspiracy 2 years later, never recovered from the loss. And Botticelli, who had certainly painted her during her lifetime and who would continue to use her face as a model for decades afterward, kept working with her image long after she was gone. The identification of Simonetta as the model for the birth of Venus is not a modern speculation. It was widely understood in Botticelli's own time. The features are consistent across multiple works he produced across a span of 20 years. The long neck, the fine oval face, the particular angle of the eyes, the weight and movement of the hair. What Botticelli was doing was constructing a visual memory of a woman who no longer existed in the world, and then placing that memory inside a painting about the moment beauty itself is born. Think about what that means. The birth of Venus, this image of arrival, of something new and perfect entering the world for the first time, is actually built around the face of someone who had already left it. The arrival is a ghost. The goddess is a portrait of absence, a painting about loss. There is a detail in the birth of Venus that becomes difficult to look at once you know the full story. The figure of Venus does not look triumphant. She does not look joyful. Her expression is the same one that appears on every face Botticelli painted using Simonetta's features. A kind of melancholy so refined that it barely shows. A gaze that does not quite focus on the world it is looking at. She has just arrived, and she already seems to be somewhere else. Some art historians have connected this to the Neoplatonist framework of the painting. The idea that ideal beauty is always already withdrawing from the material world, that its perfection cannot fully survive contact with the earthly, that reading is coherent and well supported. But it is also true that this was a man painting the face of a dead woman. Both things can be true at once. The technical choices Botticelli made reinforced this mood. He avoided the perspective techniques that his contemporaries were developing with such excitement, the mathematical receding space constructions that were transforming Italian painting in the 1480s. The world of the birth of Venus has no real depth. The sea behind Venus is flat and patterned. The figures exist in a space that feels more like memory than like reality. There is nothing about this painting that is trying to convince you it is happening right now. It is happening somewhere else, in a time that cannot quite be located. Botticelli almost certainly knew this was a choice. He was technically capable of painting space in a modern way. He chose not to. And the result is a painting that feels, even to a viewer who knows nothing about its history, fundamentally elegiac. It mourns something it does not name, what he asked for at the end. Botticelli lived until 1510. He outlived Simonetta Vespucci by 34 years. In those 3 decades, he painted her face dozens of times. He used it for Madonnas, for allegorical figures, for portraits that may or may not be identified as her directly. Some scholars have argued that the devotion never left him, that it was the organizing fact of his interior life in a way that he simply never resolved. What we know for certain is this. Botticelli left instructions that when he died, he wanted to be buried at the feet of Simonetta Vespucci's tomb in the Church of Ognissanti in Florence. The request was honored. He is buried there today. He spent 34 years making her image. Then he arranged to spend eternity beside her. The birth of Venus hangs in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, in a room that is almost always crowded. Visitors photograph it from a distance, buy postcards of it on their way out, and carry it home as a symbol of Renaissance beauty and classical mythology. Very few of them know that the woman at its center died at 22, that the man who painted her loved her for the rest of his life, and that what we are looking at, this image of a goddess arriving at the shore in perfect luminous calm, is one of the longest and most private acts of grief in the history of art. Now that you know, I want to ask you something. Does it change how you see her face? I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments.